We measure things all day, every day, a lot of the time without even thinking about it. But have you ever wondered how we first learned to do that? Today, we're going to take a look back at the simple but honestly brilliant ways we came up with to talk about things like weight and capacity.
It really all boils down to this one question. How do we make sense of it all? How do we talk about the difference between something super light, like a feather, and something incredibly heavy, like a car? We needed a common language, right? A way to get on the same page. So let's dive into how we did it.
And this right here perfectly shows you the challenge. You've got an elephant on one end of the scale and a tiny little ant on the other. The difference is just enormous. So whether you're buying something or building something or even just cooking dinner, you need a reliable way to talk about how much.
So, let's start our little journey somewhere this language is spoken all the time. A busy, bustling market. This is where that abstract idea of measurement becomes very, very real.
Okay, let's meet Rita and Shabnam. Their curiosity is kind of our entry point here. They're watching a vegetable seller use a scale, which is the very first tool we're going to look at for answering that big question of how much.
And what they're seeing is our first big idea in action, the kilogram. This is really the foundation, the standard unit we all agree on. The kilogram, or kg for short, is how we weigh solid things. It's the language for everything from giant pumpkins to small potatoes.
All right, so kilograms are great for big bags of potatoes. But what about something much lighter? A pinch of spice, maybe? A whole kilogram is just too big for that. This is where we have to crack the code a little bit and break it down into something smaller.
Now look at this. It's so simple but so perfect. On one side of the scale, you have one single 1 kilogram bag of dal. And on the other side, you've got two smaller bags, 500 grams each. And look, the scale is perfectly balanced. This one picture tells us everything. So here's the secret. 1 kilogram is made up of 1,000 smaller units, and we call those grams. So that means 500 grams is exactly half a kilogram, and 250 grams, well, that's a quarter. This simple bit of math is the key that unlocks pretty much all of our weight measurements.
Let's put this into practice with a tastier example. Imagine a sweet shop owner who needs to pack exactly 1 kilogram of sweets. Well, they could use 2 of the 500-gram boxes, or they could use 4 of the 250-gram boxes. They could even use 20 of those tiny 50-gram boxes. The total weight is exactly the same, which just goes to show you how useful these smaller units are.
But numbers on a screen are one thing. What do they actually feel like? On the left, you've got a 1 kilogram bag of salt. Seems pretty easy to hold, right? But on the right, a 5 kilogram bag of rice. Yeah, that's a whole different story. You can see the effort. This helps us turn those abstract numbers into something we can physically understand.
Okay, so we've figured out a system for solids. Kilograms, grams, we're pretty much covered. But that brings up a whole new challenge, doesn't it? What happens when you're dealing with something you can't just plop onto a scale?
Seriously? You can't just pour a puddle of water onto a weighing scale, right? It would be a huge mess. So how in the world do we measure liquids? How do we buy a certain amount of milk or juice or anything like that? We need a totally different approach.
And that new approach is called capacity. It's not about weight anymore. It's all about the amount a container can hold. And for this, our standard unit is the liter, which we write with a little L.
And you guessed it, just like we did with kilograms, we can break this big unit down into smaller pieces. You can see it happening right here as this large 1-liter bottle is getting filled up little by little from a much smaller bottle.
And those smaller units? We call them milliliters, or ml for short. And you know what's so cool about this? The logic is exactly the same as before. If 1 kilogram equals 1,000 grams, then 1 liter equals 1,000 milliliters. It's just such a clean, consistent system.
So let's look at the math. To fill up that 1-liter container, you'd need 2 of the 500 milliliter bottles. Or you could use 4 of the 250 milliliter bottles. Or if you really wanted to, 10 of those tiny 100 milliliter bottles. The math is simple, and it gives us the power to measure pretty much any amount of liquid we need.
So we have kilograms for weight and liters for capacity. And these might seem like simple ideas from a textbook, but let's just zoom out for a second and see how they literally shape the entire world around us. Just think about all the different tools that we've made based on this one simple idea. You have the classic balance scale at the market, the special scale they use for a newborn baby, the one you stress out over at the airport for your luggage.
And yeah, even the one in your bathroom. They all speak the same language, kilograms and grams.
But this language, it goes way beyond just groceries and luggage. It's also the language we use to measure the absolute limits of human strength, to celebrate some really incredible achievements.
I'm talking about people like Mirabai Chanu, an incredible Indian weightlifter and an Olympic silver medalist. At the Tokyo Olympics, she lifted just a staggering amount of weight. And how do we describe that amazing feat? With the very same unit we use for a simple bag of rice.
202 kilograms. Just let that number sink in. That's like lifting over 40 of those 5 kilograms of rice we saw earlier, all at once. It's just an awe-inspiring amount of weight, and it's all described by that humble little unit, the kilogram.
And that really brings us full circle. From the milliliters in your morning coffee to the grams of a letter that shows up in the mail, this language of measurement is just woven into everything we do. So my question for you is, what's something you measure today without even giving it a second thought?